All right, I want to welcome on my next guest. We have a very special guest. We've got former NFL MVP and the greatest quarterback in Cincinnati Bengals franchise history, Mr. Ken Anderson, with the coolest background I've ever seen on Zoom. Ken, how's everything going for you?
I'm doing great, thank you. Just doing some work around the house and waiting for the grandkids to come down.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So football's finally over for the year. I can't wait till it comes back. Bengals had an up and down season. Obviously, Burrow got hurt. What were your thoughts on the team when he was healthy?
Well, he's the real deal. He's going to be an outstanding quarterback, in the league. And this was a funny year for, a lot of teams. And, I'm excited, for the direction the Bengals are going. I think Zach Taylor's going to be a real good coach in this league. And, I think the Bengals have some weapons to work with. I think they've just got to solidify the offensive line, but they had a lot of injuries up front too. But you got to be able to protect Joe Burrow. If you can do that, he can do great things.
Where do you want to see them go? Offensive line with the sixth overall pick in the draft?
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, there's the tackle from Oregon that a lot of people, think that they're going to get. And, but here's a guy that opted out last year, I believe, and hasn't played a lot. But, they've got, Jonah Williams, the number one draft choice from a couple of years ago, missed his rookie season, was hurt some last year. So, I mean, there's a lot of moving parts in this. They've switched offensive line coaches, which I think, maybe a good deal for them. So, I'm encouraged.
What about the defense? That's what I think it was a little bit of an. I love Jesse Bates, but I know they moved on from Dunlap. Do you see that? Do you think they should add some more pieces in free agency?
Well, they got to re-sign Carl Lawson, I would think. He was kind of the only edge rusher that they had. And, when you don't win that many games, you got to fill some holes. And sometimes you can't get them all filled in 1 year. But, I think they're going in the right direction. And, you don't go from, 4 wins in a year to 12 years, 12 wins in a year. So, we just got to see, marked improvement next year.
Would you take it slow with Burrow's recovery, or as soon as he says I'm good, would you let him get back out there?
Well, I mean, I think you got to rely on what the doctors say. And, it was certainly, when you tear your ACL and your MCL and, if it was back in my era, it may have ended your career, but with surgical techniques now, I think, there have been several guys that have come back and played very effectively from that same injury. So, I'm encouraged. I think he'll come back and, you don't want to rush it, but I know he's a guy that wants to play, and when it's ready, when the doctors tell you you're ready, then let's go.
What were your thoughts on the season as a whole? Was there anything kind of jumped out to you outside of the COVID stuff with the pandemic? Like any players you thought outperformed what your expectations or anything like that?
Well, I think when you get a T Higgins that comes in and you get him, and I think he's an outstanding player. Really showed something. So I think, like I said, I think the Bengals, have some weapons that they can work with. I like the combination of Joe Mixon and Giovanni Bernard, but then Mixon was hurt, for part of the year. AJ Green was hurt again part of the year. So, it's just kind of, keeping guys healthy and getting back in the flow of things.
I'm keeping my eye on Drew Sample. I liked that. I liked what I saw out of him. I think he's in a big second year. So I want to kind of get into your career a little bit. Is it true you grew up with Dan Issel and Craig Sager?
Yeah, Dan was a year in front of me, and our backyards ran into each other. So we spent a lot of time, playing all sports together, growing up. I mean, Dan, when you come from a small town, everybody plays every sport. So, Dan, played baseball and, he played football until his senior year in high school. We had for a small school, we had a pretty doggone good basketball team. When you have a 6'9" NBA Hall of Famer, you may be pretty good. So, but no, a great guy. And, Craig Sager was a little bit younger than us, but again, he played all sports, but, broadcasting was, right up his alley. We had another guy was a first round draft choice of the New York Mets back, I think in 66 or 67, Byron Vonhoff. And it was the year the Mets brought up all the young pitchers, Seaver and Koosman, all those guys. And Byron was one of those guys. And, Unfortunately, he missed spring training. He was on active duty for the National Guard, and they tried to rush him through spring training to get him up with the big league club with all those other young guys, and he threw out his arm and never made it. So we had a pretty good class of athletes back in the mid '60s in Batavia, Illinois.
Did I see that your father worked for the school and you used to use their training equipment?
Well, my father was the custodian at the high school, and which was the greatest job in the world because it's kind of in the winter, and you shovel driveways, and you go outside, and you don't care what the weather, you play. But if the varsity had a game on Friday night, and Dad happened to have to go in and clean the gym the next day, he says, "Kenny, you want to bring some of your boys down?" And so we'd go down there, and he'd open up the coach's office, and we'd bring out the rack of balls for the varsity, and we'd have at it for a few hours in the gym.
It's unbelievable. Did you have any D1 scholarship offers? I saw. Couldn't find any.
No, no, I could have gone to other schools, the caliber of Augustana. I was talking with Millikan University in Decatur, Illinois, and, a few of those, but I knew some people that went out to Augustana, and I actually went there to play basketball and baseball. And, I think the letter, I've got it on my wall, is dated like June 23rd when my high school coach said, Kenny, you ought to try out for the football team. And so I wrote Coach Starenko a letter and said, could I try out? I was played quarterback, but I was an all-conference safety. And, at that time they take warm bodies at Division III, and so, I went there, and by the start of the year, I was the third string quarterback. And by the second game, they put me in. And from then on, I was the starting quarterback on the varsity. And then I went to the basketball team, and I was a month late for practice, but by Christmas, I was a starting guard on the varsity. And then the baseball coach called in the spring and said, "Hey, we're hitting down in the bus barns." And I was a little tired by that point, so I never did play baseball. And I thought that was my best sport.
So when you're thinking like, all right, I'm playing collegiate football, like this is as good as it gets, or did you like have higher aspirations than that?
No, I was really excited about it. My goal in life was to be a high school math teacher and football and basketball coach. And, my uncle was my idol, and, he was 12 when I was born, and he's, he's always been kind of my older brother, and I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And I remember when the Bengals drafted me, and I had a job lined up at New Trier High School in Chicago with him in the math department. And I said, "Gary, I said, if I take this, I lose this job." And he said, "Kenny," he says, "number one," he said, "your starting salary is $5,000 and you're getting a $7,500 bonus. So you're good for a year." And he said, "If you don't do it, you're always going to wonder." So it's kind of the best advice he ever gave me.
Did I see that you left school a year early and then went back?
No, I left. That was the era of the Vietnam War, and the draft was just instituted my senior year. And so it was, in the fall, and they had the draft lottery show, and we had a bunch of guys together, and all watching it, and I was the only guy under 300. They go by your birthdays. I was like 29, so I was going to get drafted, out of college, and I knew I was going to go to training camp with some pro teams, and all the scouts had said there was a lot of fuss about, especially with baseball players, that pro teams were kind of getting those guys in the National Guard or the Army Reserve rather than other people. It wasn't fair. And so they said, get in on your own. And I had a high school buddy that got me in a National Guard unit in Joliet, Illinois. And so I joined that in the fall. So I was playing football, and he would come and pick me up after a game and take me to a National Guard meeting and then drive me back to school. And then, so I dropped out of school after the fall quarter because I was supposed to go on active duty before the first of the year. Well, for some reason I didn't go. And so now I'm out of school, and the draft was in January in those days for the NFL. And so it's the end of January, the Bengals drafted me, and I moved right down there. And then when I transferred from a National Guard unit in one state to an Army Reserve unit in another state, it took a while for the paperwork. So I didn't go to my active duty until after my rookie year. So I spent that off season in the Army. And then so after my second year in the league, that's when I went back up to Augustana and finished my final 2 quarters.
I feel like contracts nowadays will probably have a clause like, "Hey, you can't be in the National Guard if you're starting quarterback in the National Football League." That's unbelievable. And so, what was your draft process like? Did you work out for a bunch of teams? How did that work?
Yeah, a lot of teams came by in the spring and worked me out. And I remember it was after my sophomore year, our coach left. Coach Sterenko left Augustana in Rock Island and actually, took a job at a Division III school, Augustana in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And so, what do I, I'd had a couple of pretty good years, and my buddy Dan Issel was down in Kentucky, and they had a new head coach down there, and he said, Kenny, why don't you come? He was an assistant at Notre Dame. He says, come down to Kentucky. I can get you in down here. And then my uncle said, well, if you're thinking about going, he talked to him at Northern Illinois where he went to school, and I could get, a scholarship there. And I'm thinking, I'm paying for my own school at Augustana. I'm coming out ahead on a scholarship. And we had an old scout from the Green Bay Packers came by, and I was talking to him about it. And he said, stay where you're at. If you're good enough, we'll find you there. So I stayed at Augustana for 2 more years.
Unbelievable. So how did you find out you're going to the Bengals? With radio? They call you? What was that like?
Well, I was sitting around in my apartment with a bunch of my college buddies, and I didn't have any money, but the local college bar, I knew the owner, and he gave me a quarter barrel of beer on credit, and we went back and we're kind of drinking beer, and I got a call from a buddy in Chicago. He said, I heard on the radio you were the #1 draft choice of the San Francisco 49ers. I said, no, that can't be right. Well, he heard it wrong. It was Tim Anderson, a defensive back from Ohio State. And so about 4:00 in the afternoon, I got a call from Bill Walsh that said the Bengals had drafted me. And the next morning I was on a plane going to Cincinnati.
What was meeting Bill Walsh like? Because this is like before he kind of like was he? I talked. Who did I talk to? I talked to Dwight Hicks, who played for him for a couple of years in San Francisco, and he said he's very like trying to think of the word to describe it. Systematic, maybe kind of like technical, like not the most sociable guy. Was he kind of like that when you kind of got there?
No, Bill and I developed a great friendship. It was a great working relationship. We had a nice off the field relationship.
Oh, cool.
As well. I think, with Dwight, it was more because Bill was the head coach, where he was an assistant coach. But no, he actually, in those days, I said the draft was in January. So the Bengals coaches would go out on Saturdays and scout a college game. So there were no meetings at night. And, when I got there and, you'd have a Saturday practice and the head coach was there, Paul Brown was there, and Bill would leave him a script for the walkthrough. And we had a defensive coach there. All the other coaches are out scouting. And so Bill, the Bengals were playing in Cleveland on a Sunday, and he actually came to Waukesha, Wisconsin to watch me play against Carroll College. And then he came out and worked me out in the gym before the draft and kind of talked the Bengals into taking me.
Unbelievable. So what was your experience like when you kind of getting to training camp? Was it easy for you, or was it kind of like a challenge?
Well, it was different. There was no off-season program in those days because, you didn't make enough money. Everybody worked in the off-season. But I was out of college, and I told you I got a $7,500 signing bonus. So I moved to Cincinnati, and there weren't the rules that they have now. And so Bill and I, starting in February, actually met 3 days a week. And we would go over the film, and he would teach me the offense, and we would go out in the field, and we would do some stuff. And so since we had no off-season program, training camp started July 7th, and we were in training camp for 9 weeks. And so, we went there, and we didn't have the numbers that they have necessarily today in training camp. And we only had one other quarterback in camp. It was Virgil Carter, who was the starter, and it was me. And so I got a lot of practice snaps. And in the preseason games, I played half of every preseason game. We had 6 in those days. So, I got a lot of playing time, as a rookie in training camp.
Because you brought up that a lot of guys had second jobs. Did any of your teammates have like really odd jobs that they'd talk about like during the season? Like, you're never going to believe what I was doing a couple months ago.
Oh, well, Bob Trumpy, I think, was a bill collector out in California for a while. I got a real estate license, after, I guess, my 3rd year. So I was kind of in real estate for a few years. And Chip Myers wanted to get into ranching, and he would go down somewhere in Oklahoma. I think we had one of our owners that owned a ranch down there and would work on the ranch. Bob Johnson worked for an adhesive company, ended up buying the company. He may have done better than anybody else.
Did you ever see the contracts being as big as they are now when you were playing?
No, because there wasn't the money. We didn't have the TV contracts weren't there, and uh, and I think that it's great that the players are making what they are now because the dollars justify it. When you sign TV contracts that are worth billions of dollars, the players deserve their share of it. So I'm so happy for the players nowadays.
What kind of numbers do you think you'd average if you were playing today and nobody could touch you?
Um, Geez, I don't know. I think Andy Dalton signed $100 million contract in Cincinnati. I think I could have done a little bit better than
No,
that.
no, like statistical numbers, like passing yards.
Oh, the thing is, the game was different back then. Number one, you only played 14 games when I started, and number two, offensive linemen were not allowed to extend their hands pass protecting. They had to keep their arms within the framework of the body. Well, how are you going to be an offensive tackle and pass protect? So if you look back at the statistics in those days, quarterbacks are only throwing it 18 times a game, 19, 20 times a game. So you don't have the gaudy statistics that they have nowadays. I think I would have felt pretty good playing in today's systems. I was an option quarterback in college. I could have run the read options and the run pass options. So I was a mobile guy. I think, geez, it was my 10th year in the league. Our Super Bowl year, I was the second leading rusher on our team. So I could have handled it today's game.
When did you sort of feel like you started to kind of find your groove, like in the NFL, and you kind of realized, like, all right, like I'll be all right with this?
Well, gosh, I know my rookie year, I played, a few games. Virgil Carter separated his shoulder, and I went in and played. And, I remember since we only had two quarterbacks that if I got hurt, the punter was the backup quarterback at that point in time. So I think it was my third or fourth start. We're out in Oakland. And I got hit in the hip early in the game by Ben Davidson. And I'd never been in so much pain in my life. And I'm laying there, and we had a veteran tackle named Ernie Wright. And he picked me up by the back of the pants and he said, "Ricky, get your ass back in the huddle. You're all we got." And so I finished the game and I gave us the lead at the 2-minute warning, rolling to the left and turned back and threw inside and tore everything in my hip. And they dragged me off the field, and George Blanda brings them back to win. The next week, I can't practice. I mean, I can't sit, I can't stand, I can't lay. Nothing was comfortable. And the doctor says, "Don't worry, we'll shoot you up before the game." And, went down to Houston, tried to warm up and couldn't. And he said, "Come on, let's go up and drop your drawers." And they started, sticking needles in me, but nothing really worked. And it was the worst statistical game I ever had. The longest pass I completed was a 50-yard interception return by Kenny Houston for a touchdown. And we got beat, and I was very glad that Virgil Carter came back the next week. But, I won the starting job in 72, and our team was getting better. But, all of a sudden, in 73, we get Isaac Curtis, and we had some great weapons, and we win the division. And so I kind of started feeling comfortable about my third year.
What was it like matching up with the Steelers teams?
Well, it's, they may be one of the greatest teams of all time. When you look at the number of Hall of Famers that they had both offensively and defensively in those 70s teams. And I think one of the things I'm most proud about that if you look at our record against the Steelers, in the years that I was the starting quarterback, we had the best percentage of wins against the Steelers of any team in the National Football League by a substantial margin. And, but again, it was just kind of tough to get over the hump with them being your division because they kept winning Super Bowls. And, if they'd have been a mediocre team, we might have had a couple more chances.
Unbelievable. What do you remember about like the first time you met Anthony Munoz?
Oh, God, was I excited. I mean, here was a big offensive tackle and a guy that was that big and was that athletic. And you knew he was going to be, an unbelievable player, right from the start. And as good a player as he was, I mean, he's a better guy. And, I'd had a good offensive line and good weapons in the 70s. And, and I'd gone to a couple Pro Bowls and led the league in passing. And, as the team goes down, all of a sudden, in the late 70s, I wasn't, good. And then, we got Munoz, and then we had another guard, Max Montoya, and our number one draft choice, Blair Bush, was a center. Another high draft choice, Mike Wilson, was our right tackle. And we had, Dave Lapham and Glenn Bujnak at guards, and geez, when the offensive line got good in 80 and 81, then I started to get better again. So again, it goes back to what we talked about Joe Burrows. The have quarterback to have a chance, you got to give them guys up front.
That's unbelievable. What do you remember about meeting Chris Collinsworth?
Well, he shows up in this little rundown car, and he was from Titusville, Florida, and there's a six guy, kind of just a gangly guy, but boy could he run, and boy could he run routes, and boy could he catch. And if you remember that year, David Verser was our number one draft choice, a wide receiver out of Kansas, and Chris was the second draft choice for us. But the guy that ended up starting as a rookie was Chris, and had 1,000. I think the first Bengal receiver ever to have 1,000 yards his rookie year, and went to the Pro Bowl.
And I know I'm jumping years around it, but I saw that you won the Man of the Year before it was the Walter Payton Man of the Year. What did that kind of mean to you?
Well, that to me, I'm probably most proud of that award than anything, because it's a combination of not only what you do on the field, but what you do off the field. And and I always believe that you need to be a part of the community, and you need to use your platform to make things better for people. And geez, that's one of the things I think I'm most proud of, the Andy Dalton years. And Andy and I got to be pretty good friends, but the difference that he and his wife JJ made in the Cincinnati community, and Boomer did such a great job in his years there, and actually built a wing on the hospital, Children's Hospital, and is still so active, with the Boomer Esiason Foundation, raising money for cystic fibrosis. And Andy kind of carried that over. And I think Joe Burrow is really doing, an unbelievable job of following in the quarterback's footsteps.
And can you talk about the Ken Anderson Alliance a little bit, kind of how it got started and kind of some of the stuff you guys are doing?
Yeah, my wife, Chris, and I have a nephew that's severely autistic, and the rules kind of change when you turn 22. You kind of age out of a lot of things, and so we wanted to figure out a way that we couldn't make his life better. As I always say, for those with developmental disabilities, we want to go ahead and let them live the life to their fullest, whatever that level may be. And so we started the Ken Anderson Foundation, and we actually wanted to build a community for them to live. And there was a tough road to hoe, and we got some great people behind us, and we were raising money. And the mayor of Cincinnati was very supportive. And I get a call from him one day, and he said, "Kenny, there's another group of Down syndrome's parents trying to do the same thing you're doing." And we met, and there was a great synergy, and we had common goals. And so we merged together to form the Ken Anderson Alliance. And so we're working to create live, work, and engage opportunities for adults with developmental disabilities. And before the pandemic hit, our engage opportunities are taking them out into the community in small groups, to movies, to play putt-putt, to go to dinner, to go to ball games. A lot of them are virtual now because of the pandemic, but we had over 20 a month, servicing about 230 adults a month.
Oh, cool.
Our work, we've got an aquaponics venture up and running that is a source of employment for them. And we have people, training for other jobs. And we have purchased 23 acres in Springfield Township out on the north side of Cincinnati, where we're actually going to build a community. And if you go to kenandersonalliance.org, you'll get a chance. It's all laid out. It's designed. We know where it's going to be. We know what it's going to look like. And we're just waiting for the right moment to start our capital campaign to go ahead and get it built.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'll link everything in here. Can you talk about the thing behind you with Keystone, how they got involved?
Well, they're when the pandemic started last year, a lot of our fundraisers were canceled. And I said, what am I going to do? So I started doing these virtual happy hours. And I'd have guys like Dan Issel on, and I'd have some of the former Reds on, and we do it from my garage. And I it's happy hour like it is now. I can go ahead and have a beer. And so we started calling it Keystones with Kenny. And so we did 4 or 5 shows. We kind of dropped it for a while, and we're going to pick it back up in the fall. And I was in Cincinnati, and I called the local course distributorship, because Keystone is a course project, about getting them in as a sponsorship. And we called it Keystones with Kenny. And so we continued in the fall right up until Christmas time. And, I had Archie Manning on, and Dan Fouts and Jada Marcus from Rascal Flats. Just had a great time. Chris Collinsworth and, Bob Trumpy and Bob Johnson, 2 of my, original teammates. And so we'll pick it back up here again in a little bit. I always start off the show again. It's Keystones with Kenny, coming to you live from the Keystone Light Studios in my garage. And so that's where we do it. The neighbors come over, so we have a lot of fun, and we do, a lot of different raffles and, dinner with Christy and I, and a lot of different things. I do trivia questions. You can win Keystone Light T-shirts, and so it's a lot of fun. And you can see a lot about our fundraisers, what we're doing, by going to KenAndersonAlliance.org.
That's awesome. Have they sent you that jersey behind you, like a mock-up they can make of that, or now?
Well, no, they haven't done that. In fact, this was a guy I was watching them and came up with this background for me and then sent it to me. So we kind of use this. I've got a few others that we use, as well. But, the real deal is I'm sitting in my garage and drinking Keystones and interviewing people and having the neighbors over to help me out.
That's awesome. That's unbelievable. Yeah, I'll definitely link everything to that. And I want to ask you about the 81 season. I saw it didn't start off too well for you.
No, they had drafted my replacement, a couple of years before, Jack Thompson, the throwing Samoan from Washington State. And, and I didn't have a great year. And 79 was probably the worst Bengals team I was ever on. We weren't very good. And that was the year that they drafted Jack. A lot of people wanted him to come in, and, and I started in 80, Forrest Gregg's first year. And, we were 6-10, and that wasn't good enough for a lot of people. And so, there was a lot of pressure on me. I felt I had to be perfect, and went out the opening game against Seattle, and I threw 3 interceptions in the first quarter, 2 of them for touchdowns and 1 to the 1 yard line. We're down 21-0, and they took me out, deservedly so. And but Jack Thompson was hurt, so they put in Turk Schonert, and he ran around and scrambled and made some plays. We won 27-21. And so now it's whether I'm going to play the next week or not. And I had a lot of meetings with Coach Gregg, and finally he says, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to start." And so we're going to New York to play the Jets. And I'm on the plane. I said, what did I want to start for? They got the New York Sack Exchange on their defensive line. Klecko and Gastineau and Marty Lyons and Abdul Salam. And I said, I might have taken another week off. I don't know. And so we're driving to Shea Stadium for the game, and it was the same weekend as the U.S. Open tennis tournament, which was their facility was right next to the Shea Stadium. And the offensive line always took a cab or a van over early. We get to the stadium and we have none of the starting offensive line are there. We go out to warm up. We don't have any of the starting offensive line there. Now I'm very nervous about this game. And finally, we found out that the van driver took them to Yankee Stadium rather than Shea Stadium. And with the traffic, they were a little late getting there, but they finally showed up, and we win 31-30, and it was a great game. And we kind of just everything took off from there.
So I have a couple of questions from some Bengals fans, and one of them kind of stuck out to me. If you could add any Bengal from the past 25 years onto that 81 Super Bowl team to kind of bolster you guys up, who would you take?
Wow. I don't know. We were pretty good back, in those days. AJ Green could probably help us out, along with, with Isaac Curtis and Collinsworth. We'd had 3 wideouts, although you didn't play 3 wideouts too often back, in those days. So, I don't know. That's a great question. We had a great kicker, Jimmy Breach, who never missed a kick in overtime, which is an unbelievable feat for a kicker. So, gosh, I don't know. No, I guess I'll go with AJ and pair him up with Isaac Green and Chris Collinsworth.
Yeah. Well, as soon as we get time travel, we can make it happen. So
okay,
we'll figure that out. And then one other question was, which of your Bengals teammates that you played with didn't get the credit they deserved, and who do you think would kind of get that? Who do you think deserves that title?
Well, I think there's 2 of them. I think number 1 is Kenny Riley, was a defensive back, played 13 years with us. No, it was 15 years he played with us. He is 4th on the all-time list number of interceptions. He came, I think, in 69, 2 years before I was a quarterback at Florida A&M, made the transition to defensive back, and, had those numbers when, like I said, we were only throwing the ball 18 to 20 times a game. He only played 14 games for a majority of his career, and to have everyone in front of him in the Hall of Fame and not him, I think is wrong. And I think the other guy is Isaac Curtis. It was a tremendous wide receiver, had He was a football player with world-class speed. They wanted him to try out for the Olympic relay team, and he wouldn't let that interrupt his football. Everybody remembers the impact that Jerry Rice had when he came into the 49ers. Well, Isaac had that same impact when he came back in 1973. And again, you know, he'd lead the league in touchdown catches with 10. Now that's not a big number in today's football, but Isaac and his yards per catch, and though he was fast, he was a great route runner and always had another gear, and you couldn't couldn't overthrow him. So those are my two guys.
That's awesome. And then so going back to after week 2, you beat the Jets. Did you just kind of find your rhythm from there?
Yeah, we were going along. I think we might have lost the next week against Cleveland, and I think when we knew we were going to be pretty good is, they always say if you're going to go to the playoffs, you got to win in November. And we had 5 games in November, the way that the schedule turned out, all against playoff contending teams, and we beat them all handily. And so we got on that roll, and I remember, I talked to the guys about this, and all of a sudden the feeling that we had at Riverfront Stadium, banners starting to show up around the stadium, and faces painted in orange and black wigs. And, all of a sudden the Who Dey chants started. And, it was just a magical feeling that we had. And, and then you get to the AFC Championship game, and it was 59 below zero, and there wasn't an empty seat in the stands.
That was against the Chargers? I'm not
correct.
So what was it like playing? Like, did you guys have the heated jackets or anything, or were you just playing off adrenaline?
Well, no, it was cold. We had heated benches. They brought those in. We'd never seen those before.
Never heard of that.
And one of my favorite, not everybody's got heated benches, but my favorite story about that game, it's in the first quarter, and I'm sitting on the bench, and they've got I'm sitting on my hands, and they've got slots for your feet to go in, and luckily I've got my helmet on, and somebody had thrown a cape over me, and there's a big roar, and I stand up to see if there's a turnover. I'm going back in. And as I stand up, my feet don't come out, and I fall. And the first thing that hits is my face mask, and I'm seeing stars. And I'm calling for the trainer. I'm calling for smelling salts. I said, I can't get knocked out of the championship game by falling off the bench. And of course, in today's world, some camera would have caught that. Yeah. And if it did with today's game, I probably would have been in concussion protocol and might not have finished the game.
Did you think you were concussed after that?
No, but there was later on in the game, I got hit in the fourth quarter, and I was out for a while, but went back in and finished.
That's unbelievable. And then so going into the Super Bowl, what was kind of like that whole situation like? I know you're going up against your former coach and Bill Walsh. So how was that kind of like bulletin board material for you guys? Like, all right, like we're going to take him down, or how was it like for you guys?
Well, they had beat us. I think at the beginning of December, I kind of hyperextended a toe early in the game, and I didn't finish that game. And, and Bill and I were very close, had a close relationship. And, you always say, hey, boy, we're going to go to a Super Bowl, and gosh, California, Arizona, New Orleans, Florida. This is going to be, we get Pontiac, Michigan was the first Northern game. And, and I think, one of the big things for us is, I said it was 59 below zero when we had our play the championship game. The weather was just as cold the next week, and we didn't have an indoor facility, and we stayed in Cincinnati, and it was tough to get too much practicing done. And I think maybe that might have hurt us, a little bit, but, we would go up there, and I remember the only place we could practice was the Silver Dome. So the 49ers lost the toss. They had to practice in the morning, and we got to practice in the afternoon. So I would pass Bill in the tunnel, every day we're going to practice as they're leaving.
So I saw the first half of the game really wasn't going in your favor, but you guys gave him a hell of a fight in the second half.
Well, you can't have, we had 4 turnovers, I think, in the first half. I threw an interception on the first series. We had the ball, from the 5-yard line. And, they say the team that scores first got the best chance to win. Well, we had a gimme field goal. Instead, they go down the field and score the first touchdown. And then I hit Chris Collins where it's inside the 10, and unbelievably he fumbles, and they get the ball, and then they're up, at the right before halftime, And, they squib kicked and we fumbled it. They got a field goal, and then they kicked off again, squib kicked it, and we fumbled it, and they got another field goal. So it's all of a sudden it's 20-0 at halftime. And, we came back and scored 3 touchdowns in the second half to make it a game. But, like I say, you can't have 5 turnovers in any game and expect to win.
If you lose in a Super Bowl to Joe Montana, like, people give you a pass. Like, come on, yeah, it's
Oh, hell no, they don't.
I as a Washington football fan who's seen 2 playoff games in 15 years, I put a little asterisk, like, you lose to Joe Montana, it's respectable.
They beat us twice that year, but we didn't give them our best shot, on that Sunday. And Joe was a great quarterback, a great career. And, the 49ers were a dynasty, of that era of the 80s and 90s. And, they deserve all the credit in the world.
So I want to ask you about this. So a couple of years later, Boomer helped them get back, didn't get the win, but since then, playoffs really haven't been, the Bengals have not had too much success. Do you think Burrow is the guy to lead them back there?
Yeah, and I think Andy Dalton, was a guy too. Now, here's a guy that came in as a second round pick, and took him to the playoffs the first 5 years, and I think, one of those playoff games, in fact, AJ McCarron was playing because he had a broken thumb. And if, running back doesn't fumble and they don't have a stupid penalty on defense, they win that playoff game and go on. So, but I think, like I said, I like the direction going, and Joe is going to be just an outstanding quarterback in this league. And, he's just, whatever it is, he's got it.
I have a question. Did it mean a lot to you that you were able to just play for one franchise for your entire career instead of bouncing around like a lot of guys?
It did, and when you come from Batavia, Illinois, which was a town of about 10,000, and then you go to a Division III school in Rock Island, Illinois, Cincinnati was a very comfortable spot for me to go to. And if you look at my draft class, they talk about the year of the quarterback. Well, it started in 1971 when Jim Plunkett was the first pick. Archie Manning was the second pick of the draft. Dan Pastorini was the third pick of the draft. Lynn Dickey from Kansas State went in the 3rd round. I went in the 3rd round. Joe Theismann, Scott Hunter from Alabama, started at Green Bay, was also, in that draft. But, they did an article in Sports Illustrated a couple of years ago, the year that Trubisky and Mahomes and all those guys were coming out, about our year of the quarterback. Yeah. And Jim Plunkett had made the statement of all the guys, Kenny was the lucky one that he got to go to a stable franchise with Paul Brown and Bill Walsh, and they were right.
Unbelievable. And I saw, but before I let you go, I saw you did some coaching after your career.
Yeah, I always, as I said earlier, I wanted to be a high school math teacher and football and basketball coach. I mean, I always wanted to coach. And, had some opportunities, I thought, and everybody says, hey, Kenny, you don't want to coach. The hours they work, the sacrifices you got to make, you're stupid if you want to coach. I didn't want to be stupid. So I went in and I was actually working for a local radio and television station for 6 years. And, it just, but I always had that itch. And so after 6 years, I kind of talked to Dave Shula after the season. He was the head coach of the Bengals, and he had a quarterback opening, and he hired me. So I spent, 10 years with the Bengals, and I spent 4 years with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And my last 3 I spent in Pittsburgh with Mike Tomlin, and had a chance to get a Super Bowl ring with the Steelers.
What was it like coaching Ben Roethlisberger?
Oh, what a talent. What a talent. And I said, I always told people when I was there that if I had to pick one player in the league to start a franchise with, it would be him. He was big, he was accurate, he was mobile, and just one heck of a quarterback.
I had one other comment from somebody. It's not really a question. I don't really know what they're thinking. They said, did you save the mustache from '81 and put it next to your AFC Championship ring?
No. And that mustache came back to haunt me, one day when I first got to Jacksonville, and we're sitting in a team meeting, and that picture happened to show up, and the players called it my porno stash. So, and then, all of a sudden I'm kind of, I think Ben knew it was going to be my last year coaching up in Pittsburgh. And we went into the beginning of December, and all of a sudden there are these pictures of me posted all over the building, and he labeled it, it's Ken Anderson Grow Your Mustache Month. So I said, all right, you jerk, I'll grow my mustache back. So I grew it back for a month when I was up in Pittsburgh before I left.
I got one last question for you. What's your favorite story from your whole career? Just kind of like your favorite moment of your career, or something that sticks out to you.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think it was, going in that locker room after the AFC Championship game and, under brutal conditions and seeing the elation on the players, and then going up to Paul Brown and getting to say, Coach, we're going to the Super Bowl. And he was so happy for everyone.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, that's really all the questions I really have for you. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat for a few minutes. It's been awesome. Can't wait for football to start back up. And I'll link everything to the Alliance on here so people can find it. I can't wait to keep up when you get some more happy hours going on. I'll definitely join one of those Zoom calls. But this has been a blast. I really want to thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And if you ever need me again, give me a call. You know how to get a hold of me.
Absolutely.